If you do that just in the next week or two, I would think that 2 weeks from now, you'll be scoring 7-10 points higher. This is Zabdi, and she's looking to increase her LSAT score from a 141 to a 160 in the next 4 weeks. My name is Steve Schwartz, and I've been teaching the LSAT for the past 20 years. Today, Zabdi's going to share with me her biggest LSAT challenges, and I'm going to help her address them as she looks to get that 20-point increase in the next month. Catch me up on your journey, where you're at, where are you currently scoring, and what are you hoping to score?
So I took a diagnostic test when I first started the tutoring sessions. It was a 141. And then I recently took one and it was just a little bit better, just a 145. I find myself just second guessing a lot on I narrowed down between 2 questions and I second guess myself and I end up picking the wrong answer choice. I'm understanding better the stimulus than when I did before a month ago, but there's just some type of disconnect when I look at the answer choices.
Really common issue, down to 2, choosing the wrong one, yeah.
Yeah, relatively, I would like a 155 to a 160 will get me into law school that I want to, so.
Got it. And what's your time frame here? When are you taking the test?
I'm scheduled for April.
Okay, so we've got
literally
just about a month
yeah.
between now and then. Yeah, okay. So we're looking to get you maybe 15, 20 points in the next month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about how your process has changed since you joined the program.
I can say that it's helped a lot just with understanding how to actually look at the stimulus and how to dissect the stimulus, looking what premises support the conclusion. Also, just making sure that I am studying, most of the time rather than, because I do have a daughter and I have a job and all this stuff. So it just gets a little difficult having that discipline. So the tutoring has helped with that. And just any information that I doubt myself on, the tutor does explain to me and I kind of grasp at that. So yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're finding it helpful. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now as we get into this final month?
I think really it's just the structure of the stimulus. Because I last session, me and my tutor reviewed necessary assumption versus sufficient assumption. So I've tried to really identify those because I think that's where I'm having the most difficult. But I just think it's really just ignoring all the background information and really understanding the stimulus to match, the correct answer choice.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you got to break down the stimulus. The choices only make sense in the context of the stimulus, right? So I'm glad that you're recognizing that. I was really impressed with what you put together in the wrong answer journal, where you're breaking down each of the questions you're getting wrong or having difficulty with. Would it be helpful for you if we dived in there a little bit?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So let's take a look at that. I'll pull it up here.
Most of my takeaway is just not interpreting the stimulus in the correct way.
Right. Okay. So you're categorizing them by question type, right? So you have flaws, principles, necessary, resolve, disagree, agree, weaken, parallel, most supported, parallel, role. So all different types. That's excellent. I'm curious. I mean, it looks like you're putting all of your review for each question in the same cell of the sheet, right? So everything for prep test 150, section 2, question 4 is all within this block, right?
It's just the ones that I've reviewed. So they're not a part of a whole practice test, because with the study guide, there's certain ones on there that they just tell you, from different pre-test. Just each cell is just a different question, but in that category.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So my thought here is, what if you were to break this down a little bit more, where for each specific question, you had a separate column for stimulus, question stem, tempting wrong answer, unappealing right answer. These are great. I mean, some of them are quite detailed, like this one here. Some of them are a little bit less detailed, perhaps, like the one below it. So I'm wondering if you could ensure that your review for every single question you get wrong or have difficulty with, if you were to break down that single question into several different columns. So what your headers here for row 1, flaw, principle, necessary, resolve, etc. What if that was just a column in your sheet, and then for each individual question, you had a section for tempting wrong answer, unappealing right answer? So in other words, every question will actually have maybe 5 or 6 different columns for that single question.
Okay.
Every student should be reviewing their mistakes in depth for every practice test you take, every timed section, every drill. And the reason is that every question that you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. And it's far too easy to look at the answer key and say, oh, I get it now. How could I have been so dumb? And quickly move on to the next question unless you are keeping a review log, an error log, a mistake journal, or as a lot of folks call it, a wrong answer journal. Every single student should be keeping some kind of tracker listing the questions you're getting wrong or having difficulty with so you can figure out what are the key insights you can extract from your review to make sure that you can avoid making the same mistake again. And far too many students who are self-studying or using one of those apps are not going into sufficient depth with their errors. And so at LSAT Unplugged, we use a framework called the Socratic review method where we guide our students to review better and to learn better. And our wrong answer journal, whatever you want to call it, the idea is that you are tracking and looking at every single element of the question, whether your mistake came from the stimulus, the question stem, or the answer choices, tempting wrong answers, unappealing right answers, and then we go over your tracker with you during your private one-on-one coaching sessions to keep on track with what you're doing and why, so that you can avoid making those same mistakes again. And if your tracker is not sufficiently in depth, your review will not be sufficiently in depth. And there's nothing worse than thinking you're studying, thinking you're doing things properly, only to realize later that you weren't getting the full value out of the study hours that you were putting in. And so more than just explaining questions to you the way that a book would or the way that a video would, during our coaching sessions, we are going over with you your wrong answer journal, your mistake journal, your error log, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that you are structuring it the right way. And through our programs, in our courses, in our coaching, we're giving you the exact templates and tools to make sure that you're doing it the right way. But even if you're not one of our programs, you can still take the insights in what I go over here with Zomdi to apply it to your own LSAT prep situation, your own study process, to make sure that you are drilling deep in the exact right areas that you need to be focusing on. Most importantly, your analysis of your thought process during your initial attempt, and then upon reflection, what you could have done differently to make sure that you avoid making the same mistake the next time around. One of the biggest issues students face on the LSAT is not understanding the argument. In logical reasoning, we call this the stimulus, and it is incredibly important that you understand what the argument is saying, because the choices only make sense in the context of the stimulus. And so I was really happy to see that Zomdi recognizes the importance of slowing down, taking the time to build that foundation and understand what the argument's saying. What's the conclusion? What's the evidence? What's the gap between the two? Once you understand these three pieces, you then understand what is the method of reasoning, and you'll be in a much better position to evaluate the choices, the tempting wrong answers, and the unappealing right answers. Hey, real quick guys, a lot of you have been asking me, how can I get featured in one of these LSAT study breakdowns? How can I get feedback on my LSAT study plan? The only way is to join one of my LSAT coaching programs. You can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out.
I see what you're saying.
So what I'm envisioning for you is that you have like a column for this is the prep test section question that this came from. We have the stimulus, we have the question stem, then we have 2 columns for the wrong answer and 2 columns for the right answer.
Okay.
And the 2 wrong answer columns would be, why was this tempting? Number 1. Number 2, why is this ultimately wrong?
Okay.
And then for the right answer, why was this initially unappealing to me? And then finally, why is it ultimately correct? Because you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And we want to make sure that you're fully getting the takeaways in terms of what traps you're falling for so that you can avoid making the same mistake again.
I think that you are right. I think maybe I just need to dissect my review a little bit more. Because at first I think I was just like overwhelmed, and I thought maybe like the more questions that I do, the better I will get at it. But I think I have to like really dissect each question that I'm getting wrong so I just don't make the same mistake again. Because just by doing the questions, I'm just going to keep doing the wrong things. And I think that's what I was doing. And just, you know, it's just kind of overwhelming, and then you get anxiety and then just try to manage all that. So
yeah, of course. Well, you're certainly on the right track here. You're doing a lot of the right things, and it's possible that for a lot of these questions you are wrong answers, right answers, but I want to make sure that you do it every single time, that you drill down into exactly what was the heart of the issue with the question that you got wrong or found difficult. And so dividing up your review in this way will make sure that you don't leave any understanding or any points on the table, which is especially crucial given that this is your final month. Far too many students skimp when it comes to the review process because it can be kind of addictive to take test after test, measure your results, be happy or sad about those results, and then move on to the next. After all, there are dozens of actual official released LSAT practice tests, and so if you want to track your tests on a weekly basis or maybe twice a week and then see how am I doing, am I getting better, am I getting worse, am I plateauing, you get addicted to that feedback of seeing what are my results going to be this time around. The thing is that the true growth comes from analyzing your mistakes, figuring out which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for so that you can avoid making the same mistake the next time around. In other words, the benefit of taking those practice tests, of doing those drills, of taking those time sections is to give yourself more at-bats so that you can get more questions wrong. In other words, the benefit of playing the game is the post-game analysis, not just seeing what your score was from that practice test or that quote-unquote game. So the idea here is that it's better to take fewer practice tests and do fewer questions and review them in more depth than to do a greater volume of questions but only skim the surface when it comes to your review process. And so when you're keeping that wrong answer journal or error log, the point of taking the test, doing the questions, is to give yourself chances to get questions wrong so that you can review those mistakes in depth, highlight what are going to be those key takeaways or insights from your practice tests, from your analysis, so that next time around, you'll know what to watch out for, which habits to change and adapt, how to adapt your approach and adjust it accordingly for your next at-bat so that you can do even better. And then based on your performance next time around, you can then see, okay, well, did this new methodology work for me? Did this new strategy work for me? Or do I need to adjust yet again? But it's rare that I'll find someone who has time to do 3 or 4 practice tests a week and review those practice tests in depth. It might be a lot better for most students to do just 1 or 2 tests a week and allow more time to review those questions in sufficient depth using a framework like the Socratic review method. Now, how many hours are you devoting to your prep per week on average over the next 4 weeks?
So I just started like a month ago with the tutor sessions at the beginning of February. I would say I dedicate around like 8 hours a week, 8 to 10. That's normally how much I dedicate.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any more time that you could potentially put into this just for this final sprint?
Yes, I really want to just dedicate all my time this month so I can really just be more prepared than I feel now for the test. So I can definitely do that.
Okay, so by how much? So all your 8 to 10 hours a week versus all your time, there's a lot in the middle.
Let me see. I can probably dedicate 4 hours a day.
Yeah, in that case, we're probably effectively looking at something like 20, 30 hours a week. So we'd be doubling, maybe even tripling what you've been putting in so far.
Yeah, I've been trying to wake up really early around like 6 a.m., study, and then I'll study sometimes 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. So I've been trying to get consistent with that. Because I would really like to just get a good score for the first time, and I know I can do it. It's just a matter of really putting the dedication into it and really dissecting what I'm doing wrong, but that's obviously time consuming. So
yeah, I mean, the LSAT can be a time consuming process, but the good news is that, I mean, you're taking your test in a month. If you can go hard at it by putting in 20, 30 hours a week, doubling, tripling what you've been doing up to this point, that alone could get you at least half of the way there to your goal of 155, 160 plus. And then on top of that, we also deepen your review process. We structure it more deliberately, more in depth. Those two compound. Either of them alone could have an impact, either deepening your review or just putting in more time. But when you combine both of those, more time devoted to better review, that's awesome. That leads to maximal returns. If you do that just in the next week or two, I would think that 2 weeks from now, you'll be scoring 7, 10 points higher. Then with another 2 weeks on top of that, you're getting to your goal.
Yeah, I just think like the first month of the tutor, it was just a lot of information that I just didn't even know about the LSAT, just all the question types, and you have to read it a certain way that it just took more time for me to really understand it. And then now it's just kind of putting it into practice.
Exactly. And that's what often happens when you first join a program like ours, is that you don't know what you don't know. Right. And so especially when you're in that low 140s range, there's still some foundational work to be done, and that's okay. We're building up your familiarity with the different sections, the different question types. We want to make sure that you understand the proper perspective from which to view each. Then once you're doing that, then it's a lot of drill work to deepen your understanding, build that pattern recognition. And then after the fact, the review, the post-game analysis. And so that's what I want to help you do, is go deeper on that post-game analysis for every section you do, every exam you do. How many sections or exams timed would you say you're doing per week?
I've only done one, so I haven't really done any other timed.
Okay. Do you think you could start doing it minimum one timed a week?
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it'll help a lot with building that pacing and endurance. And that's one exam a week with that 8-10 hours you were doing before. Now that you're going to up it significantly, well, start slow, maybe just one exam this week, but now that you're going to up it significantly, maybe 2 a week.
Okay.
2.5 hours for one sitting. And then maybe later that day or the following day, you're doing that review of that exam that you just took. The more you take the exams, the more you simulate test day conditions, the more familiar it is. You reduce the anxiety, and with 25-30 hours a week, you could probably fit in 2 exams plus detailed review of those exams, plus you're meeting with your coach, plus maybe you're doing some drills on the side or some individual sections on the side as well. Up to this point, Zabdi's only been putting in 8 to 10 hours a week, which works out to maybe 2 or so hours a day, maybe 5 days a week at most. But there is so much more time in your schedule in most cases if you're willing to carve it out. Even if you work 9 to 5, you've still got 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and you've still got 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. I'm not saying you got to study 8 hours a day, but you could probably carve out at least 3-4 hours per day, 5-6 days a week. And so when I pushed her a little bit to go beyond those 8-10 hours, she said to me, yeah, I could put in as much time as I need to. So I said, let's get concrete about this to make it more likely it'll actually happen. So then she thought to herself, well, I could do 2 hours in the morning. I could do 2 hours in the afternoon. So already we've got now 4 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. We've already more than doubled the time that she's putting in. And she's thinking maybe she could do even up to 30 hours a week. And so that goes from 8-10 hours a week to 30 hours a week. That's triple the time or more. And so if we layer in putting in double, triple the time, plus a more in-depth review process over the next month, I'm really excited to see just how much farther Zabdi can go in her understanding of this exam during this final crunch time, this final last month. If you're looking for a quick LSAT refresher or you're just getting started, check out my free easy LSAT cheat sheet linked below this video. It's got my best actionable insights to get you started and set you on the path to success. You can grab it below this video and it's 100% free. As we look back at this review document just for a minute, do you have any questions about what you've done here or any questions about transitioning the approach to a new format?
No, I think the new format will be helpful. So I can definitely include those cells. And instead of putting the whole question in just the box, I will split it up into the stimulus, like what the stimulus is about, what the conclusion is, what the evidence is, and then the tempting and unappealing right answer.
Exactly. So the stimulus, the question stem, what was tempting about the wrong answer, what was ultimately wrong with it. For the right answer, what was unappealing about it, what ultimately makes it right.
And for the question stem, basically just copy like what the question type is or what the actual whole question stem is.
Just the question type is probably sufficient. Okay. Just so that you can more easily get a bird's eye view of what's going on. If it's more concise, you can more easily scan and see any potential trends in what you're getting wrong. Let's see if we look at your sheet, for example, not a whole lot in the agree-disagree category, not a whole lot in the role category, at least looking initially. But then if we look at flaws, of course, there's probably going to be a lot. Actually, no, there's only 2 there. Scanning across, there aren't too many questions in here yet. So as you fill this out more, then you'll be collecting more data so that you can see more. And when I looked at your answer keys, by the way, your answer sheets for 152 and 151, I think it was, and there I saw a lot of them were just later in the section, the ones that you got wrong, which could just indicate that they're harder because they're later in the section because it gets more difficult over time. Okay. So it might be that there's foundational work to do, yes, given where you're scoring, but at the same time, you might be getting harder questions wrong just because they're hard.
Yeah, your mind just played tricks on you, and then you just get overwhelmed, and that just kind of disconnects what you should be, like applying the things properly, to the question. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So, sometimes the stress of the timed conditions, the stress of the actual full exam or the endurance associated with it, that also can lead to a bit of a drop in performance. And the antidote to that is doing more practice so it becomes more familiar. You also then look at your pacing and flagging strategies. So maybe you're skipping some, flagging them, coming back to them later. So you develop that muscle memory as to when to do that, when to flag, when to skip, when to come back versus hammer away at it for another 30 seconds or a minute. And by the way, when you're not seeing trends for what you're getting wrong, just to circle back a little bit, I would think about, okay, well, let me at least focus on the more common types because you're going to get more of a lift from those. Those are the higher yield areas to spend your time. If you improve in flaw questions, for example, that's going to give you a big boost because they're prevalent on the exam. They're one of the most common types. In contrast, agree, disagree, there aren't quite as many of those. For the randos, like evaluate the argument, there are hardly any of those. And so you don't want to devote time there until you've mastered the more common ones.
Yeah, I found that flaw and the necessary assumption are like one of the two main question types on there.
Yeah, they are two of the most common, with inference meaning must be true, most supported being the third as well in that group. To recap, the big takeaways, one I'll add right now is, focus on the most common types, flaw, necessary, inference. Those are going to give you your biggest lift in terms of any question type drilling or foundational review. Next big recommendation is deepen your review process. Instead of orienting the review sheet by question type, just make question type a separate column and then orient it by stimulus, question stem, tempting wrong answer, why was the wrong answer ultimately wrong, why was the right answer unappealing, and why is it ultimately correct. So 2 columns for the wrong answer, 2 columns for the right answer. And then my last big recommendation is devote more time since you can. You've been doing 8-10 hours a week, which is good for maintaining some steady forward progress. But for the final month, to get you those 15-20 points, we're going to want to go hard at it because devoting more time with these new strategies in place, those benefits will compound, and that's what's going to get you the 15-20 point increase in the next month. So double, triple the time you're devoting if you can. A few hours in the morning before work, a few hours in the afternoon. We can up it from 8-10 hours a week you've been doing previously up to maybe 20, 25, 30 hours. Big benefit to putting in the time this final month. And also in accordance with that, doing more practice tests, minimum 1 a week, ideally 2 a week, plus detailed review of those exams. Since joining the program, Zabdi has already taken some important steps to start documenting her review process. Far too many students will simply look at the answer key, say to themselves, oh, how could I have been so dumb? And then they just move on to the next question. But the real work is slowing down and understanding what mistakes you're making and why, so that you can avoid making them the next time around. And so Zabdi is, in some cases, being pretty detailed in analyzing her thought process, both during her initial attempt and then upon reflection, what she could have done differently. But I'm encouraging her to go even deeper by splitting up her analysis of a single question into a couple of key categories. Analysis of the stimulus, analysis of the question stem, analysis of what was tempting about the wrong answer choice that made her pick it, and then upon reflection, what ultimately makes that answer choice wrong. And then for the right answer, what made it unappealing at first glance, and then upon reflection, what ultimately makes it correct. Because you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you understand exactly what mistakes you're making and why, you may just end up making the same mistakes again. And when you're looking to improve 10, 15, 20 points or more, as Zabdi is, the breakthrough is going to come down to figuring out exactly which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, so that you can highlight them and avoid making those mistakes again.